Prezzies! Whoever says video games aren't art clearly hasn't played WarioWare before. And the latest one, being WarioWare Get It Together, might just be the zaniest WarioWare yet. This time putting you in direct control of a small cast of characters that you play as across every microgame. And that's on top of featuring a renewed focus on multiplayer that we haven't seen to this degree since WarioWare's GameCube days. Now, WarioWare has always been a little meta, but Get It Together takes it to the next level by taking the typical WarioWare trappings and trapping the entire WarioWare crew inside them. And this completely changes how you play the game. Sure, you're still trying to survive an onslaught of rapid-fire minigames with simple objectives like
crack
or
dodge,
but this time you do so by directly controlling one of a handful of characters across each one. And it changes everything. At times, it almost feels like more of a rapid-fire platformer, or a shooter, or whatever the heck you'd call this. Point is, every character plays quite differently from the others, and as a result, it changes how you play through each microgame. Wario can freely jetpack around while dashing side to side, Cricket moves and jumps like a platforming character, whereas Cat and Anna can't stop jumping at all, and can only fire projectiles to the left and right respectively. And then there's 18-Volt, who can fire projectiles in any direction, but is otherwise a sitting duck, unless he grabs hold of one of the gold rings that are added to some microgames for characters that otherwise can't get around. And since the character you play as randomly changes between microgames from a small pool that you pre-selected, you really have to keep on your toes. I was worried that this new character-based gameplay might homogenize the entire experience, but it actually has the opposite effect, adding another layer that makes the action even more frantic and unpredictable, with many microgames feeling entirely different depending on who it's paired with. Running and jumping your way out of this cave is one thing, but having to do so by grappling gold rings is quite another. And with around 20 different characters and over 200 microgames, that leaves thousands of possible combinations to explore. And since you can never be quite sure which combo you might end up with, it makes for a truly exhilarating experience and you have just seconds to come to grips with your character before being thrown into the next microgame. Story mode is the main point of entry, and in fact is required playing if you want to unlock the rest of the experience, which you absolutely should. It's pretty short, a couple of hours at most, which isn't out of line with the rest of the WarioWare series. And like the previous games, it spreads to 200 plus microgames across a dozen or so levels, with each one being based around a loose theme like fantasy, nature, or my personal favorite, Nintendo classics. On your first playthrough, each level is paired with a character who will automatically join your team, though the remainder of the slots are left up to you, which ensures that you have a chance to try everyone out, not that there's any lack of opportunities in this game. As always, you have 4 lives to try and get through the 15 or so microgames before taking on the level's boss, which is more of an extended microgame, or minigame if you will, than it is a proper boss fight. If you win, you're off to the next stage. But lose, and well, you have to start the entire stage over. Or at least that's normally how it would go. But this time, you can pick up right where you left off at by cashing in a small amount of in-game currency. It's almost too convenient to ignore, which does have the effect of making the story mode feel easier than past games, as there's no real penalty for dying, which I found slightly disappointing. And yes, I know it's technically optional. But of course, the real challenge lies in replaying the stages on an endless loop to try and net a high score, without a safety net. The microgames themselves are as fun and diverse as they've ever been, with scenarios that can only ever make sense within the context of a WarioWare game. Like this bikini-wearing banana. 9Volt's collection of Nintendo games, as always, are a standout, even if they take a few more liberties than usual to fit in with Get It Together's unique format. I will say though that I'm not a huge fan of the boss stages in general, as they can feel repetitive and slow down the pace of the game. Although I did quite enjoy the Nintendo one, which is essentially just a series of new Super Mario World levels, which feel especially great to play as when using a more grounded character like Cricket. For perhaps the first time in series history, there's an actual singular story interwoven throughout, but it's incredibly bare bones, involving some bugs and trying to escape, and it's told almost exclusively through basic text-heavy cutscenes which hardly add anything meaningful and quickly feel repetitive. But they're short and don't affect the pacing too much, so whatever. Better yet, the entire story mode is now playable with 2 players, a first for the series, and it's a ton of fun. It works pretty much the same as single player, only now with either player having the chance to complete the objective, or hinder it as the case might accidentally be. But that's just the kind of chaotic energy that made me fall in love with WarioWare in the first place. Some microgames are even slightly modified to account for both players, ensuring they're always interesting no matter the case. And I have to say that as one who's played through literally every WarioWare game to date, having some company along for the ride certainly helped make the entire experience feel even fresher, and also made revisiting levels in pursuit of a high score far more fun than just by myself. Speaking of multiplayer, you'll find quite a few games to play in the Variety Pack section that unlocks after completing the story mode. And it contains both the best and worst that this game has to offer, with about half the 10 games being great, if not brilliant, and the other half being pretty terrible. Most of them support from 2 to 4 players, and there's a pretty clear theme that separates the good ones from the bad. The half that incorporates and embraces the microgame experience are consistently great, whereas the ones that focus entirely on the characters themselves miss the point entirely. Those games include a subpar soccer game, a poor imitation of volleyball, a bad platforming game where you seek out exciting collectibles like paper contracts, and a ridiculously simple fighting game, all of which are either too shallow, unbalanced, or too random to be much fun. The diverse cast of characters totally work within the context of an always changing microgame landscape, but they're not strong enough to hold down entire minigames of their own, completely divorced from the rapidly changing microgame context. Especially since some characters are so vastly superior to others depending on the game that it's not even close to a fair fight. But even when it is, the action is too fundamentally simple to be engaging for long, if even that. Button mashing your way to victory with a single attack does not a good fighting game make. Now, although most of the modes in Variety Pack do support multiple players, there is one single player exclusive mode mixed in, which is basically multi-man melee from Super Smash Bros. And it's not very fun either. The good news is you can easily ignore all the bad games and focus entirely on the other half that are actually great. Take Pucker Up for example, which isn't just a clever name. Here, players compete to be the one to knock a puck into the goal, which awards them the opportunity to play a microgame. If they beat it, they'll earn a point, but if they lose, their opponents will get the points instead. And that's not all, because the others who aren't playing can screw with the player who is by shaking, swinging, or even squishing the screen, which is freaking hilarious. There were times where I literally couldn't see what was happening on the screen at all, but it did make a victory all the sweeter. Next, Duelius Maximus is a pretty standard head-to-head game with both players facing off in a microgame challenge, where either player can take damage for failing a microgame, or in the case of the lightning round version, if you're not the first one to beat it. It's simple but effective, and I had a lot of fun with this one too, although the lack of a 3 or 4 player option is a bit of a bummer, especially since the GameCube pulled off a similar feat 20 years ago. Rising Star, on the other hand, is a little more unique, as 2 players cooperatively compete within the same microgame space, with a godlike character awarding a point to whomever it determines did the most work, which I'm not entirely sure is always rooted in reality, but it's consistently hilarious all the same. He'll even take away points for a bad performance, so make sure to say your prayers to the WarioWare gods before engaging. Sly Angle is a neat little competition where players partake in several rounds of bespoke microgames, with the winner being able to pin pin to a board, in an attempt to control as much space as possible based on how your pins link up. You can even try to take over space that your opponents have already claimed. I did find this mode to be most enjoyable with at least 3 players, as it felt a little slow and predictable with just 2. Finally, returning from WarioWare on GameCube and Wii is Balloon Bang, which has most everyone frantically trying to inflate a balloon while they take turns playing microgames. If the balloon happens to explode while you're up to bat, well, it's game over. It's fast and furious and fun. Great stuff. Now, although I had a blast with the good half of the multiplayer modes, they're definitely more suited for quick diversions rather than something you would specifically invite your friends over to play, but they're certainly a great complement for any fun-filled night. Regardless of how you play, the presentation is consistently wonderful, especially with regards to the amazing title screens in Variety Pack. Whether it's the wistful nature of Gotta Bounce that nearly gave me an existential crisis, or this brilliant art in Frenemy Frenzy. And that attention to detail extends to most of the rest of the game too, whether it's the introductory cutscene for each level, or the varied art styles for each and every micro game. There is no shortage of creativity on display in WarioWare Get It Together, and it feels right at home with the rest of the series. There is just 2 parts of the presentation that gave me pause. First are literal pauses in the voiced dialogue, with only about half of the text in the cutscenes being voiced, which is a little jarring, like the budget ran out halfway through a line or something.
Yo, hurry up and show us!
Yes!
The second is performance related. While the game mostly runs at a stable 60 frames per second in single player with a rare exception or 2, I did notice some considerable frame pacing issues in multiplayer at times, generally as the speed increases, which is a little off-putting in a game that demands fast and accurate inputs. Although you can see most of what WarioWare Get It Together has to offer in just a few hours, the game does attempt to add some replayability in a few different ways. First is the Wario Cup, which is basically an online leaderboard where you compete in a different challenge each week. But we weren't able to try much of this during the preview period as the first challenge is still ongoing. but it seems fine. The second is a strange but somewhat addictive gameplay loop where you can use the cash you've earned from playing the game, including by completing various missions, which are essentially in-game achievements, to buy random Prezzies from a Prezzie-laying chicken machine, which you can then gift to whichever characters you've unlocked in an effort to level them up. Now, this has absolutely zero impact on the gameplay itself, and is purely for the purpose of unlocking extras related to that character, such as different skins, palette colors, and best of all, some cute little artwork for each character they can do nothing else but gawk at. It's all nearly meaningless and borderline a complete waste of time, taking me about 8 or 9 hours to unlock most of it. But I can't deny that I had a bit of fun trying to figure out which character might like which Prezzie the most in order to maximize my return. And that goes double for when I had a group of friends over and we debated the merits of who might like what the most. Overall, it's a pretty forgettable addition, but it works well enough in providing some extra incentive to revisit aspects of the game even after you finish story mode. But if it doesn't interest you, there isn't a ton left for you to do outside of replaying story mode levels for a high score, or messing around in the Variety Pack's multiplayer games. Ultimately, WarioWare Get It Together is a wildly fresh take on what's already a pretty zany series, which is saying something. Rather than being beholden to the latest console gimmick, it reinvents itself by giving you a variety of playable avatars. And it works super well, injecting a breath of fresh air into a series that, for all of its zaniness, has nearly crossed over the line of feeling a little stale at times. That, combined with an excellent 2-player cooperative mode and some truly great multiplayer experiences found in the Variety Pack, resulted in WarioWare Get It Together being a game that I liked a lot. If you're a WarioWare fan, it's absolutely worth checking out, especially if you have friends along for the ride, even if the ride might be a short one. And there you have it, GameXplain's review of WarioWare Get It Together. Let us know if you plan on picking it up yourself in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and of course make sure to subscribe to GameXplain for more on WarioWare Get It Together and everything else Nintendo Switch. We'll catch you later. Bye everyone!